Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. These sweet peas are still flowering in the middle of August. And that is not a given, because last year my sweet peas were all over by now, easily. It was another hot, dry summer, and the sweet peas hate being too hot and too dry. But sweet peas, I figured, were one of the essentials of life, and that my garden was diminished beyond any bearability if I didn't have it. So we have watered them quite a lot. And that's meant making some hard decisions because, of course, like everybody else, we've been short on water and short on time. Haven't had a hosepipe ban, but these need watering every other day to keep them flowering. It's all part of the story, really, of this summer, of managing drought, and they haven't done badly at all, although by now the stalks are getting quite short, which is what happens as new flowers are produced, and you'll see there are seed heads coming. They are desperate to produce seed, and if you don't keep picking them, they will all go to seed, and that's it. And once they've gone to seed, they won't produce any more flower. The Jewel Garden's identity is based around rich colours and also exuberant growth. And so the pots that are such a key part of the identity of the Jewel Garden have to be equally strong. We need really big dramatic plants. So for this year, we've been using gingers and dahlias and cosmos. But, and this is a big but, with the way that the climate's evolving, it means we have to water these pots every other day. And I don't think that's sustainable on time. I don't think it's sustainable in terms of the environment. So what I'm going to do is plan for next year's pots, not just here in the Jewel Garden, but all over the garden, which only need watering once a week. And that means a totally different palette, a different set of plants, and a different challenge. A plant which I know will work well in this sort of new way of thinking for pots is Artemisia. And it's one of the Mediterranean herbs that I planted in this area, which has got very poor soil. And this hasn't had a drop of water other than rain. Now, Artemisia Powys Castle used to be, 20, 30 years ago, a stalwart of many, many displays in containers. It's sort of rather fallen out of favour, but it's time to bring it back. And it's great. It's got this lovely silvery foliage. It has very small yellow flowers, but it's the foliage you grow it for. And it just will take a huge amount of heat and drought, and easy to take from cuttings. So I've got a polythene bag, always a good idea, however tough the plant is. Put them into a polythene bag, and just take a non-flowering shoot and pop it straight into the bag. And the reason you pop it in a bag is because that slows down evaporation. You've cut the plant, it's still losing moisture, but it can't take up any more moisture through its roots. The basic principle for almost all cuttings is the same. You need a very free-draining compost. You can use perlite, you can use cork chips, you can use sand, you can use grit, but just make sure that don't just put it straight into your peat-free compost you use for potting. So fill a pot like that and have that ready. And then take out one section at a time. If I stuck that into the soil, there's too much leaf, and where you have leaf, it loses water. So what you want to do is help it by taking off some of the foliage, and this is where your sharp knife comes in. This is where I need glasses. Just go down like that. Cut close to the stem and remove excess foliage. Now, if I leave that, That's still a bit too much, so what I'm going to do is just cut the top of it off. Just slice through the top like that, and that leaves some foliage, but not too much. Can you see here, where the foliage was attached, there are nodes. There's one, there's one, there's one. It's more likely to produce roots from just below one of those nodes. So it's a good idea to cut cleanly just beneath the node. Then using a dibber, don't just push it into the compost, but make a hole and ease it in. I'm putting it in the corner because it just keeps the moisture in a little bit more. Pop that in there like that. So water it until the water is coming out of the bottom of the pot. Let it drain. You want it to be moist, but not swimming in water. And then you need to make sure to keep the air around it relatively moist. For most people, a hand mister will work absolutely fine, but you will need to do it a couple of times a day. Just mist them so that it's nice, moist air around it. Another way is to get another polythene bag that's big enough, put a few of these sticks in like that, and then put the bag over the top. This is after you've watered it. Put it tight, and that will keep the moisture in. And these should root in about 3 to 6 weeks. Once they've rooted, you'll see new growth. And then you can take them out, you can pot them on individually, keep them over the winter. You want these to be ready to add to your pots after the spring bulbs. So these won't be used until maybe as late as June, certainly not before May. You could also use lavender, you can use rosemary, you can use some Santolina. These are all Mediterranean plants that have evolved to cope with extreme heat, poor soil and drought, much more than the dramatic plantings that I've got so used to in the dual garden. Now, Adam has been to East Anglia, where if it's dry here, you know it's going to be drier there. He's gone to visit a wall garden revamped at Home Hale Hall, near Swaffham.
Set deep in Norfolk's rich landscape is a rare jewel of a garden, steeped in tradition, but planted with a modern eye. It's a garden with something for every taste. A productive kitchen garden, herbaceous borders, fragrant roses, and formal arches of trained fruit. Looking after this breathtaking walled garden is head gardener Chris Marchand. Take me back to the beginning.
So I came here about 9 years ago. I was just started off just helping out, got my foot in the door and never left.
Yeah, bless you. Well, I can see why.
Yeah.
But sort of what was it like when you arrived?
So the structure was basically the same, the box hedging and everything, but everything had got a bit too big and a bit out of proportion.
Yeah.
And the planting itself, some thuggish plants had really taken over.
There feels like it's an incredible history here. I can't wait to see more. Come on. The old brick wall that helps define the space provides warmth and shelter for the plants within. And flowers dotted amongst the vegetables offer unexpected splashes of colour, which in turn help attract bees and other pollinating insects. I love the way your sort of 4 hard-working quadrants are then wrapped by this lush sort of shrub and herbaceous planting.
Yeah, these are the June borders, so they were sort of really at their peak a bit earlier in the year, but there are things in here to keep the interest going, like this copper beech topiary, which kind of echoes the copper beech that are out in the parkland.
Plus you've got the cherry plums as well, haven't you, as well?
Pick up that colour.
And the catinus does exactly the same thing.
Yeah, so these catinus, every year we stall them, so we cut them pretty low, and they come back with these slightly bigger leaves, and it keeps them as a sort of shrub.
That's an interesting thing, actually. For people at home, you know, sometimes you see something like catinus and go, well, it's going to grow to 12 foot, I can't have it. Yeah. But the fact that you can cut it back, you can have that beautiful foliage and stem. Yeah. You know, and use it in a smaller space. And what was the thinking with herbaceous?
Well, it's a very soft colour palette, so everything's kind of like with this Nephophia toffee nosed here. You know, instead of being a red hot poker, it's more this sort of soft, creamy, warm colour. Yeah, this Artemisia acts as a bit of a sort of matrix plant through this large border.
That's had a really good summer.
That's loved it. That's loved the conditions. It's loved the dry.
I tell you what else I like. You've got the pathways going through the planting, but these little glimpses back into the sort of more hard-working quadrants.
Yeah, into the more formal veg, which is for the house and for us gardeners as well. But yeah, you have this sort of formal border in between with the box edging and then the more wild planting after that.
As you leave the kitchen garden, a hornbeam hedge leads you through to an explosion of late summer colour.
And we move into the next room now, which is the late summer garden.
Wow. I mean, seriously, that box there, that looks like a little box of fireworks. You know what I mean? It's somebody's just let them off.
Yeah, plenty of height.
Do you play with that every year?
Yeah, so we'll do a lot of editing. We'll move things around if they don't like where they are. The edges of these get incredibly dry, so, you know, the plants on the edges have to be able to cope. With these island beds, you know, you can move all around them, so there's nowhere to hide. You can't shove anything in the back. It's just a warmer, slightly hotter palette, which sort of suits the low light and at this time of year.
I mean, honestly, I'm looking and I'm transfixed. I'm looking at different stem colours and lots of different flower shapes.
And then something like this, one of my real favourites. This is a devil's spit scabious.
Yeah.
Again, a wildflower, but looks great in this context and doesn't need any staking, holds itself up well in the dry.
It does, mate. I'm going to stop. I'm going to make everybody see how clever you are. Because, honestly, when you sort of do that, and then you bring some of that foliage in together, and then you've got the pink over there.
Yeah.
It's a lovely little mix there. Beautiful. And wow, and then it sort of all drops a level.
Yeah, and again, we've got the formality of the box parterres, but the planting inside is much more, you know, wild and loose and can be a bit more sort of exuberant.
And then the quinces, look at those, they look absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's one of the only things that was kept in the garden, but it's getting old and it's probably getting towards the end of its life, so there's this other one here that mirrors it, echoes it, but then at the same time it would take over from it.
I do love the way you've used the sort of yellowy oranges, the dahlia, and then onto those Rebecchias.
Just little accents softened down by the silver foliage.
And it just gives you this rhythm, movement all the way through.
Yeah.
So what is your favourite part of looking after this place?
I think it's just watching it evolve. I think it's just seeing, like, same with the meadows, like year on year they're different. In here, every year's different. It depends on the weather, it depends on, you know, and some things don't work, some things do, but every year it's a chance to start again and have a reset and, you know, do it all over again.
Do you know what? That's a lovely way just to summarise, you know, every year.
Yeah.
It's just a chance to do it again.
Yeah.
I love that, mate. That's brilliant.
Well, Adam visited there last August when it was very dry, but it's a lot drier this summer, so I hope the garden is still looking as good now as it was then. And the effects of the drought that have come to all of us are manifesting itself in all sorts of curious ways. For example, this is my mulberry tree, which I planted 5-6 years ago, and it's chosen this year as the first year to produce some fruit. But they're tiny. Mulberries can be, you know, the size of a decent raspberry or a blackberry. And because it's been so dry, the fruit are very small. When they're really dark and come away in your hand, then they're ripe. And you think, if you've never had one before, it's going to be a bit like a raspberry or a bit like a blackberry. But it's much more intense. It's this rich, rich taste. Now, here in the orchard, there's another factor that is really indicative of the drought. Because all these apples, which are covering the ground, are not windfalls that have dropped because they're ripe. These are apples that are half ripe, that the trees have jettisoned. The tree is running out of water. The fruit are taking up a huge amount of that water. In order to save some fruit, they have dropped apples. Now, it might seem like a disaster, but actually it means that the tree is responding to drought and handling it. So if you find your apple trees are dropping apples left, right, and centre, don't worry. It's a result of the drought, but the tree is looking after itself. Okay, so much for fruit. Let's get some vegetables. So this is Florence fennel, which has the same feathery foliage as what I think of as normal fennel, which grows tall, but this has these overlapping basal parts of its foliage. And that is what we want to eat. Now, the truth is these have started to bolt. They haven't got the really fleshy base that you get when you buy them. As soon as fennel feels any stress, whether it is too dry, too wet, too hot, too cold, it'll bolt. But that'll be fine. Just cut off the feathery bits. And there you are. That's the fennel you eat. Now, there are lots of ways of cooking it. I really like it poached, actually, in a little bit of white wine. And to grow it yourself, there is a kind of freshness to it and a sweetness. But I planted it this year along with courgettes. Courgettes must have water, fennel must have water. Putting them together means I've only had to water once. I've doubled up again here. Dwarf beans is a yellow variety, and an outdoor cucumber, a ridge variety called Marketmore. We cook it as much as we eat it raw. It's very simple. You just put some butter into a pan, chop the cucumbers up, fry those for about 3 or 4 minutes, and then stir in some cream and a bit of salt and pepper. Serve piping hot. It's absolutely delicious. And we've had lots of cucumbers outside. And the beans have loved it because we've had to water the cucumbers, so they've got water too. I've been eating beans for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now listen, I'm not going to play with your carrot. Would you like a cucumber instead? No, you want a carrot. Up. Good boy. I have 2 cos lettuce, one conventional green, which I put between the sweet corn, and these, which I want to harvest now. This is a red cos, a little one. But if I just cut that like that, that has worked well. But you can see that is starting to go, starting to bolt, so I need to eat these quickly. The real problem I've found this summer with the hot weather is that everything is accelerated. So once a batch of plants starts to bolt, it happens practically overnight. Whereas in a normal summer, you can gradually pick things. And I say normal summer, maybe those days are past. Maybe we need to think about planting in smaller batches. And finally, you've got a combination here which is really working. These are purple sprouting broccoli. Underneath, they're planted with chicory. The broccoli leaves are shading the chicory. Both have deep roots. I have watered these once every 3 weeks, and they've been fine. Because the chicory has got a deep tap root, and it doesn't need nearly so much water. So it's a question of combining plants, of making sure that you can use the same water for both plants, but also the virtue of shade. And the truth is, we're all learning. We're learning how to adapt our traditional techniques and all the things that we've learned over the years to dramatically changing climate. But some things in gardening will always remain constant. And that is the pleasure you get when you discover gardening and you start to create your own garden. And this is certainly the case on the garden we went to visit near Newmarket in a village gloriously called, looking at the weather, Wesley Waterless.
Hi, I'm Maurice Biggins, and we're in my garden on the Suffolk-Cambridgeshire border. Gardens, oh yeah, I started quite young when I was probably about 12. My great aunt and uncle had a garden, I just sort of started weeding and looking after it, really just to get extra pocket money, but then I kind of fell in love with just doing it for its own sake. My favourite perennials are probably the heleniums, because I love all the daisy family, the different colours and the texture of the flowers. When we moved in here, it was a new build house, and the front was basically just a gravel car park. The rest of it was all just completely grass. I knew I had sort of strong ideas of I wanted this sort of more Mediterranean patio for sitting, and then I wanted a nice curvy bed that winds its way through all the naturalistic planting. It was quite exciting to be able to design all these things and implement them. As well as being a keen gardener, I'm also a keen photographer. I think that gardening helps my photography and vice versa, because for both you really need to have an understanding of the colour wheel and form and texture, shapes, the way light interacts with things. I think these are all important. So here my selection of plants have got different heights and textures. The sedums are a late flowering plant which are great for butterflies. They have a nice sort of flat top to them. We've got the echinaceas with their interesting seed heads. So you don't want everything uniformly the same height. Verbena bonariensis sort of lining the path and provides great nectar for butterflies. And then we've got this Stipa gigantea, which adds great height and texture and movement. It's a good sort of 2 meters or so tall with these large seed heads, and that adds even more movement. It screens the rest of the garden so that you can't see everything. The Achilleas, they have their large flat seed heads and flower heads. These ones have been Chelsea chopped earlier in the year, whereas the ones at the back have grown much taller because I left those alone, so I've got a bit of a variety of heights there. I'll leave all the stems over the winter, which provides interest and looks great when they're covered in frost, and also provides seeds and habitat for wildlife. On this side of the border, I really get into the blue scheme here with the big expanse of Perovskia, and we've got Eryngiums and Echinops here which carry on this blue theme. I had a career for over 20 years as a software engineer. It's obviously it's a very, very strongly technical discipline. What it doesn't really have is any sort of creative outlet, really. With gardening, I find it's a combination of the technical side, because you need to know how to propagate, how to prune, how to grow things. You really need to have the sort of creative and artistic side. Grasses are used to punctuate and add a bit of background and a bit of texture and movement. I like this Calamagrostis Carl Forster because it's got lovely golden hues, but it's more upright and vertical. Sporobulus adds a bit of more of a low-growing form and a green texture. And then here we have Festuca glauca, which gives us gorgeous blue foliage. I've always tried to garden organically, and I really just rely on nature to do the job for me. Particularly when I put the pond in, that sort of improved the pest control, because now we've got newts and toads and frogs and dragonfly larvae. The front garden is both a garden and car parking space, but I'm not precious about the plants really. They're all pretty tough. What has happened is that a lot of them have self-seeded into their preferred habitat, which is this sort of gravel area. So these little Euphorbia myronites love the edge here in the gravel. Being at Bampton is one I discovered it, an open garden. I think I hadn't heard of it before. It has a darker foliage which looks quite good, and it helps you navigate the drive and improve your parking, because it sort of guides you along the path. A lot of the plants really like germinating in gravel. The Stipa tenuissima in particular seems to really thrive in here and just pops up here, there and everywhere, which generally I just leave it because yeah, it looks far more naturalistic than I would actually be able to manage to design and plant them. So they're just kept in check by the cars going past. They don't really mind getting run over occasionally. If you're starting a new small garden, you want it to look bigger than it is, then don't be afraid to plant some big plants to give a bit of height and structure. Oh, hello, Lupin. You want to be on Famous, do you? Another tip is to... Oh, I've forgotten what it was. The cat's now distracted me. Don't have a cat. A garden is never really done. I'm pleased with the way lots of things have developed, because every day it changes, and obviously every season, and I like walking through each day and sort of the intrigue and mystery of, oh, I wonder what's around the corner.
I love the fact that Morris used the creation of his garden as a way to express his own creativity. And I've always felt that gardening at its best is a creative act. It is artistic. It's a means of expression. And 3 cheers for that. Now, however creative I might be in the garden, I can't stop things dying back. And actually, given the weather we've had, some things have performed perfectly well, but died back much quicker than normal. And it certainly applies to this phlox. This is a phlox called amethyst. It's got wonderful purple flowers and looked great until about a week or so ago. So what I'm going to do now is to lift some, divide it, so next spring I can plant them out and spread the phlox around the garden. Now, this is a job I would normally do in September or October, but because it's been compressed by the heat and the drought, it's perfectly okay to do it now. And it's very straightforward. Just dig up a clump. There's a clump. This can go in the barrow. There we go. Now, on to the next stage. Right. I've decided that I'm not going to pot these up. I'm going to plant them out into a nursery bed. It means that these stay in the soil in which they have adapted, the biome, the relationship between the roots and the whole world of life, of fungi and bacteria and all the rest of it, in the soil, so that they will go on growing, they will adapt to their new home quicker, and then when I transplant them next spring, they will adapt again quicker. But the process, whether you put them in the ground or in the pot, is exactly the same. So, first of all, cut back the top growth. I do not want them to grow this year. I want all the growth to be from the roots. Right, there are 2 things you can do at this stage. You can either divide them down into their smallest possible unit, which is basically a stem with roots attached, and that will make you lots of plants. But you need patience. Those plants won't make a sizable clump for at least 2 and maybe 3 years. I want to plant these out next spring. So I'm going to keep the clumps quite big. For example, I'm not going to break that up. That's fine. And you can see there's a really good root system on that. I'm going to leave the soil on it. So that will get planted out here. So we'll pop that on the ground. And then this is too big. And the easy way to break that up is with a spade. like that. So we'll put that out there. I've placed these in a row because when you're lining anything out, it's so much easier to keep them weed-free, to keep them hoed, if they are in rows. As far as replanting it, all you've got to do is just plant it at the same depth. So just pop that in there like that, fill back round it, and that will be fine. Now, whether you plant in a pot or in the ground, they will need a drink. Absolutely essential that once you move them, you give them a really good drink. So I've got a hose here. Luckily, we haven't had a hose pipe down this summer, which is one of the benefits in living one of the wettest parts of the country. But hose pipe or watering can, give them a drink. I want to show you some of the more dramatic results of the heat and drought. In this part of the garden, I have 4 big pots with 4 Cornus Cusa, Milky Way. They're lovely. But like all cornus, they need lots of water, and I've been watering these every other day. And about a month ago, when the heat was at its height and there was a wind blowing, so there was a double whammy, I'd watered 3 of the pots, and then the phone went, and I answered it, and I'd forgotten that I hadn't watered this pot. So then I waited another 2 days to water. So effectively, this didn't have any water for 4 days. The plant has gone into desperate stress and basically has jettisoned its foliage, and it's died back. And without any foliage, therefore, it will transpire a lot less and save water. So the plant is almost certainly still alive. If you scratch it, you can see green, and it will grow new foliage next year. But it does show you how fine the line can be between a healthy plant and a plant that is clearly in great distress, simply for a few days watering. Now, about the time that my poor old cornus was having the indignity of losing all its leaves, Frances went to Devon, and she visited a beautiful village, very picturesque, but one where there is no vehicle access at all, which means everything has to be brought in by hand, which makes life interesting. And what made life marvelous for Frances was that it was raining.
Cascading 400 feet down a North Devon cliff is the picturesque village of Clovelly that dates back to the 13th century. When you look up there, even on a miserly atmospheric day like this, it's so beautiful, but you can see gardens clinging to the rocks. Gardening somewhere like here must have its challenges. I mean, this is obviously incredibly beautiful, but it's full of amazing plants and amazing ideas for planting on a slope. So terracing all of this creating of level plains that you can plant into is a really lovely thing to do. And when I look at the plants, I see a whole range. There's things like buddleias and self-seeders in all the cracks of the walls, ivy leaf, toadflax. But then there's surprising things like hydrangeas and fuchsias, and then roses, which do actually do surprisingly well right by the sea. I also really like the little pots going all the way up the stairs, which just makes the most of this rather steep staircase. It's gorgeous. Wow, look at the size of this nasturtium and look at the size of the leaves. They're enormous. Really healthy plant. I suppose when you're gardening by the sea, annuals are your friend. You know, winter storms will kill off a lot of plants. So if you're choosing perennials, you have to be very careful and find things that will cope with winter storms and summer sun. Or you choose annuals that will grow really well. And I love the way it cascades down this wall. It makes really good use of the vertical spaces. One of the great things about nasturtium leaves is the way that they interact with rain. So the droplets form like little pearls on the foliage, and they sit there until they get too big, and then they run off. I love that.
Rain or shine, residents of Clovelly share their gardens with a steady stream of visitors.
Hi, Sharon.
Hello.
Oh,
Welcome to Clovelly.
thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
Sharon King first came here as a child and has lived high on the Clovelly cliffs for the last 36 years.
What a view, eh? That's incredible.
I've got a garden by my house, and then you come across the street into my garden here.
Yeah.
So all the gardens in Clovelly have been cut out and made by the people that live in the houses.
You're open to it, you're exposed to whatever the weather brings.
I am here because I'm right on the edge of the cliff. Other people have got more sheltered spaces. But if you imagine when the wind rocks up here in February and the water's coming over the wall, the waves are coming over the wall. So I have to plant for the weather. I like to see movement, so I like a bit of chaos. I like things that are going to wave, because the wind will rush through here and everything needs to be able to move and bend. So you've got to have things like this, which are really hardy and are quite stuck, that just come back year after year, that are just going to take the elements.
Yeah.
Really.
Describe to me what challenges a gardener faces here.
So everything that's brought down has to come from the top of the cobbles.
Okay.
So you carry it, or you bring it on your sledge, or you
Because
put it on your
there's no
shoulder.
cars.
No cars. We're a traffic-free village. So that's why you try and make use of what you've got, recirculate what you have, find what you can, don't throw things away. I very much reuse whatever I can find.
Yeah. I'm just back near the house in Sharon's garden and looking at her lovely planting. And it gives you a real clue as to what does well in this kind of environment. If you're in any extreme environment, looking at your neighbour's plants and seeing what's happy and healthy is a really good clue to what you can grow yourself. So just here, we have this incredible sage. This is just a salvia officinalis, one that you would eat, and it's doing so beautifully. It's got lovely big leaves, it's really lush, and it's got beautiful purple flowers there as well. And it looks fantastic against this Californian poppy. When they're happy, they tend to seed themselves everywhere. This is a lovely lavender that Sharon's planted here, where there would have been nothing before, and it's full of bees. So it's really doing a good job here, as well as being very beautiful. But look, right in the middle of it is a little Californian poppy. This is one of Sharon's installations. As she mentioned, that when you're planting here, you have to use what you've got rather than bringing loads of things in on sledges down these hills. So this is just some assorted reclaimed pots full of lovely plants like pelargonium and this really bee-friendly bidens here, which also looks very beautiful. Making use of space. This is a bin, look. Nicest bin I've ever seen.
Perched high above the harbour at the top of the village are the Clovelly Court walled gardens. Within these 18th century walls, head gardener Neil Coldrick tends to a wealth of wonderful fruit, flowers and vegetables.
Hi, Neil.
Hello, Francis.
How are you doing? What a beautiful space this is.
Yes, it is, yeah.
This is incredible, this nasturtium strip.
Yeah,
So bold.
when it's really sunny, it's stunning. But it's a great crop for us because we can use the leaves, the flowers. They're all used by local restaurants.
Oh, really?
Yeah, again, local villages if they want to use them for salads and things like that. And it's a good weed control as well.
You can see there's quite a sort of free approach where you let self-seeded things grow, and it's, I mean, just looks so pretty.
Yeah, we do a lot of seed harvesting ourselves, so things will be allowed to go to seed. It's the mix of flowers in the beds attracts a lot of pollinators. Obviously, it's an ornamental garden as well.
Yes.
So there's interest for everybody.
Do you have the same challenges as the village? Because obviously they're so exposed to the elements, whereas within these walls, maybe are you a little bit more protected, and maybe does the coast raise the temperature a bit?
It does to a certain extent. Glass houses last week, 45 inside when it was at its peak.
Hence all those grapes that are ripening
Yeah.
so well. But I mean,
Yeah,
it's
they are, they're good.
amazing to be able to grow. I could see citrus.
Yeah.
Apricots pretty much ripe.
Yeah,
Peaches.
apricots will be ready this month.
Yeah.
Got lemons in there, good crop of oranges down the bottom as well. The orange blossom was stunning, so there's going to be a lot of oranges later in the year.
Every day is different.
Yep.
And that's what keeps it interesting.
Oh, it is, it is. It's rewarding.
In this part of the garden, you can see the rows of planted crops. Those fennels, they are amazing, those fennels. I wish I could grow them that well. Then there's self-seeding allowed to happen in amongst it with flowers, so verbenas, there's foxgloves here, this borage is sprawling all through. They're here because they provide for pollinators, but they also make it feel looser and more romantic and more beautiful. Also, when you look around, a lot of things like the lettuces and the parsnips have been allowed to go to seed, and that's so they can collect and save and reuse their seed. And hopefully by doing that, they're going to have specimens that are a little bit more resilient and resistant to the salt and to the wind and to the climate that they have here, which is undoubtedly quite extreme. I think Clovelly is such a unique place. But I think what I have taken from this is how extremely difficult it is to garden in a place where you can't just use your car. And so it makes them reuse, recycle. And I think it's really interesting how they see the weather, they experience the changing climate, and so they know they have to do that for the future. They have to do it for practical reasons as well. And that maybe by looking at the old-fashioned ways of doing things, we can all protect the future a little bit more.
The thing that really strikes me about that, other than I wish we could have had some of that rain, is how much we take for granted using our car to go to a garden centre, to move things around, that it's not so very long ago that everything had to come either by horse and cart or by hand. And of course, the way you make gardens completely changes as a result. But the process of what I'm about to do now will be been the same for the last millennia, if not longer, which is to sow seeds. And now we've reached August and getting towards the end of summer, it's a good time to start planning for next spring, particularly in the vegetable garden. There are plenty of seeds that you can sow now that will go through winter and then you will harvest next year. And one of the chief ones for me are spring cabbage. I love spring cabbage. Spring cabbage, by definition, is a loose leaf, and there's a freshness to them, so it's certainly well worth growing. Now, I've got a variety here which I've never grown before, called Winter Jewel. It is worth sowing them as carefully as you can. And what that means is trying to space them out regularly. If they start life with as little competition as possible, they will develop a better root system. Right, gently press those down. I'm not ramming it down. All I'm doing is making sure there's contact between the seed and the compost. I've run out of vermiculite, so I'm going to cover these with more compost, just sieved lightly on top of them, like that, just to cover them. Clean it up, label it. Right, having done that, I need to water them, put them somewhere warm, but at this time of year it doesn't need extra heat. If you haven't got a greenhouse, a windowsill will do the job well. They will germinate in about a week. They'll be ready to prick out in about 3 to 4 weeks and grow on, ready to plant out into the garden in October. We're going to the Isle of Wight now, to the former home of the great Victorian poet Alfred Lord Tennyson, and to join the head gardener team of Ellen and Ali Penson-Smith, who have brought skill, love and attention to his garden.
Alfred and Emily Tennyson came to the Isle of Wight and just fell in love with Farringford. When they viewed the house and Emily came, she stood in the drawing room and said, "I must have that view." They just loved it. It was a beautiful part of the country, wild, isolated, the kind of place that a poet could sit and write some amazing poetry. So it remained in the Tennyson family for quite some time, till about the 20s, and then they sold it to a holiday company who developed it, turned the house into a hotel, and then it was sold on again, and they built 18 holiday cottages on top of the walled garden. They got rid of it. It was completely gone. When Ali and I first arrived, this was a field, almost, with some paths in it, and it was very bleak. There was kind of grass with a lot of weeds, and we arrived in February. It was thick drizzle and windy and pretty bleak, and we were regretting our life choices at that moment in time. I came across this story about the Tennysons here, and when they arrived, they came on a rowing boat across the Solent, and they brought their maid, and their maid just burst into tears because it was so bleak, so desolate. She wondered what on earth had happened, and I kind of felt a bit like that when we first arrived. So that one's when we, before we even started. I think you were double digging that bit,
I think
weren't
so,
you?
yeah. I can still remember. It still hurt. My back still hurts thinking about it.
This garden is incredibly exposed. We are sloping towards the west, so we get quite high winds across the garden. And the first kind of 5 years of planting, we found that we had lots of areas that just kind of died off, and it was purely down to the wind. So we spent quite a long time working out what grew well in those conditions, and one of the plants here, actually, it's looking amazing this year. It doesn't normally flower so well. It was known as Hebe, but I think it's Veronica stenophylla now, and it is a stunner. The idea of the garden really was to recreate something that resembled what was here when the Tennysons lived here. So Helen Allingham was a Victorian artist. She was very good friends with the Tennysons, and she would come and visit and stay at Farringford. And I guess she painted the garden while she was staying here. We had some watercolours which gave us the impression that it was a very cottage garden style, very wild, full of self-seeders, very naturalistic kind of planting, very soft, very flowing. The journals of Emily Tennyson were really valuable insight into what was here. I did have a look at some of his poetry. Some of it's quite long, some of it's quite morbid, but actually there are a lot of little poems that are nature related. So he was very inspired by nature and his environment around him. I mean, I've drawn quite a lot of inspiration from the poetry, as well as, yeah, the paintings and the journals.
These are Salpoglossus. It was Tennyson's favourite flower. We've got 3 varieties here: Cube Blue, Black Trumpet and Cafe au lait. I mean, the Cube Blue is stunning. It's got this midnight blue tinge to it, quite exotic looking.
They're tricky to grow. They're a very fine seed. You've got to surface sow them. They need a high temperature to germinate. They're fiddly. And they really don't like the humid, drizzly, windy conditions we have at Farringford. They much prefer being in the greenhouse. You could plant them outside in a border, but here they work best, don't they?
Yeah, they
Sat
do.
in here.
This is a lovely rose here. This one's pure poetry. I mean, it's lovely having the Ami through the garden, and that sets seeds quite well, but it is a bit of a thug, so we're constantly pulling it out.
So the key thing really for the garden is that it has this careless, ordered look. As we picked up on this quote that Tennyson had made to one of his friends, that the garden was careless, ordered. And that's kind of the ethos, that's the vision that we had. Everything's got to be kind of quite wild, quite reasonably unkempt, although it's probably a lot tidier than it was when Tennyson lived here. It's quite funny because now gardening's going in a more wild, naturalistic way. That is the ethos of the garden. And Tennyson, maybe at his time even, was a bit of a trendsetter. This central border was the first bit we planted. So when we arrived here in the February, these weren't planted until May. The initial planting was very structured, so we had a lot of old-fashioned roses. We've got things like yucca here, which is, I suppose, quite unusual in a mixed border, but Tennyson would have grown these. There was a little quote in one of his accounts of Farringford about his yucca that no winter quelled. It's a big responsibility, it's a lot of work to keep it looking good. We've got a team of volunteers. They do a lot of deadheading, a lot of mulching. They do work hard for us. Because I think you could quite easily walk in here and think, oh, the stuff's just kind of thrown in. So although it looks quite effortless, it's, yeah, it's a heck of a lot of work. With a garden, you can keep it very historical, but it could be quite boring if you're not experimenting and changing. And I feel like Tennyson was quite an interesting person. He would have experimented and had a go at trying different things here. It's not something that people do every day, and it's just been such a special opportunity to be part of that project, to be part of such a massive restoration, really. It is a lovely place. It's challenging, but that's what keeps it interesting.
It's so good to see that Ellen and Ali have given some love and care to what was a really important place in the history of English literature. Tennyson is one of our greats. OK, I'm now going to plant out in this bed that had beans some thyme. This is normal thyme, Thymus vulgaris, that I sowed in spring, put into a seed tray, pricked it out into these plugs, and you can now see nice little plants. To grow it successfully, you need to have two considerations. One, it needs poor soil with very good drainage, hence the raised bed. And two, it needs sunshine. And that means no shade at all. Other than that, it's a tough plant. It's adapted to cope with very harsh conditions. And of course, that means that it's ideally suited for the sort of weather we've been having. And it can be planted out about sort of 6 to 9 inches apart. And when I sowed these from seed, people did say, you know, really? Thyme, is it worth doing? You can go and buy them. But actually, this is one packet of seed, it's 40 plants, and they will work really well for the kitchen as well as being decorative. This will make a mat of thyme, and of course the bees love it. They'll just swarm over the flowers, and when the warmth hits the leaves, you get that wonderful Mediterranean fragrance. Now, although this is a plant of scorched hillsides, there are two things I need to do to make it useful to me. The first is to water it, but no more than once a week. The thing that mustn't happen is they sit in water. And the second thing is, to keep it good for the kitchen, I don't want it to become woody, which thyme tends to do. I want to keep its soft growth. Keep cutting it back so there's new soft growth growing. If you leave it, that will become barer and barer and barer at the base with just a few leaves at the tip. But probably no plant in the garden is easier than that. Now, talking about easy, here are some lovely jobs for the weekend. As buddleia flowers start to go over, the bush is covered with rather unsightly brown remainders, and it's a good idea to prune these off. Now, not only does that make the bush look better, but also it will provoke side shoots to produce more flowers and therefore more precious nectar for butterflies. It's becoming apparent that we all should be collecting as much rainwater as possible. And to that end, a key component in that is to make sure that all your gutters are clear of any fallen leaves, moss, or debris. And then the water, when it does rain, can be collected in troughs, water butts, or tanks. At this point in summer, rhododendrons, azaleas, and camellias are forming the buds that will provide next spring's display. And if they're not watered now, the buds can drop off before flowering. Ideally, you'd use rainwater to do this. But at times of drought, any water will do, including grey water, as long as they get a regular water for the next couple of months. Now, this is a job that I just do once a year, which is to give Topiary Nigel his annual haircut. And this is a really good time of year to cut any evergreen, any kind of yew, hedge, topiary, or if you've got box or privet, cut now and it will look sharp all winter. Now, I don't claim to be any kind of expert with topiary. This is just a bit of fun. Those of you who remember Nigel know that actually this looks nothing like him, but there we are. There are too many mistakes I made early on to change that at this stage. The first mistake, and the biggest one, was to plant it on an east-west axis. And so this side is permanently in shade compared to this side, so that it grows much thinner. And what you want is dense growth, because then you can cut into it really hard, and that will get even more dense. The harder you cut, the denser it will be. So if you've got a very thin, weak area, cut it back hard. But like everything else in the garden, give it a go. Give it a go, see what happens, and have fun. And that's it for today. But I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next time. So until then, bye-bye.